And welcome back to Yuri's Box. In this video I'll be going over the CPI release, came out yesterday. And if you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. And as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice. So yesterday was another step in the right direction as far as inflation is concerned. Headline came out at 2.3. And again, just to go take a step back, I actually started making videos right here, okay? During was actually February 12th. Remember, the date was a Wednesday, and it was a hot read. All right, we had 3%, and it seemed as though inflation was going straight back up, and we were going to be in the 1970s all over again. And it was actually at this point right here I started making videos, and my speculation was that from that point on, we were likely going to see inflation roll over, similar to what we saw in 2023. So from the fall really to the end of the winter, between January and March, we usually get a bump in inflation, right? Looking at, for example, what happened in 2023, during that exact time frame, we saw prices be a little bit more sticky, all right? We saw inflation stick around that 3% mark, and that really left a lot of people feeling quite antsy about, about inflation. And again, the best explanation I can give you is that right smack in the middle right here is where the holiday season is, all right? The lead up to the holiday season and the holiday season itself, people are generally feeling better, generally. They spend more, they travel more, they consume more. That'll put upward pressure on inflation. But eventually, we go out of it, we come out of the other side, and we resume the previous trend. And my speculation right here was that we saw basically the exact same thing happen in September till really January. Meaning that as well as the holiday season that was right here, and so the associated increased spending that you see during that time of the year, traveling more, consuming more, yada, yada, yada. You also had some transitory events that probably made the economy look a little bit better than it probably was, and inflation look a little bit worse than it was. So from September to January, you saw inflation move up. But again, my speculation was that from this point on, you would likely see inflation head south. Now, my speculation on top of that was I was arguing for taking a bullish stance on bonds, is like things like TLT, and we can talk about that a little later. Right now, I wanted to focus on the CPI report, and again, it is a step in the right direction. We're still missing another piece of information which will come out tomorrow in the PPI, the Producer Price Index. We'll see how that comes out. However, I did want to highlight a few things because, first off, one of the biggest events that actually happened over the weekend, and sadly I wasn't online, I couldn't cover it live, is this breakthrough that we got with US and China, right? So we slashed tariffs from 125, and we're basically now at 30%, all right, from goods coming in from China. And this has also coincidentally fueled the rally, right? The continuation that we've seen. Well, today we're well over 5,900. But again, this really is being fueled by the fact that we slashed tariffs. And I kind of get it, because what we're really doing is removing the trade embargo that we had against China. And what the trade embargo would have really implied is, things coming to a halt, which would have been extremely negative for both countries, all right? Now we bring them back to 30%, and I want to offer a mental exercise, and I go back to what I said, actually what we went over, here it is. I was about to say that I cancel it. Of course not. This is kind of the work frame, the idea that I gave before April 2nd, right? And just for a minute, just let's forget that we got, this second outcome right here, all right, with the medium to high tariffs. Let's just say that we had 10% flat on everyone and 30% on China. Now, it would not have been, as dramatic as the cardboard that we saw on April 2nd, but it's still a huge hit, right? We're still talking about a 30% tariff on goods coming in from China. Now, does that mean that, is it better than an embargo? Absolutely. But I think we shouldn't really lose sight of what is, the ink, the black on white, really, on the paper, what is being written. And what we have is tariffs that are substantially higher than what they were before. All right. It's, again, I remember saying this and I'll say it again. What we're doing with going from 125 to 30% is effectively saying, well, first off, you start off with saying, I'm going to cut my leg off. And then you're saying, I'm not going to cut my leg off. Therefore, I grew another leg. No, you didn't grow another leg. You just didn't do something incredibly crazy. All right, that's the point. So this, for me, doesn't really change the outlook for inflation in general. We still have to deal with tariffs, and we'll eventually deal with them in the coming months. Could we see CPI move up? Have a 1 month increase? Potentially, but I wouldn't expect that to be I wasn't expecting it this month either, simply because we had a huge increase in inventories. So we still have quite a bit to chew and to eat on, all right? So I expect that we'll probably see that further out whenever it is that we go through all the inventory that we've that we've built up basically in the lead up to tariffs. And before I move on, I'll point something else out now that we're at it. If you know that tariffs are going to go up, what will you do? If you know tariffs are going up, you're going to buy whatever it is you need to buy because you don't want to be one of the schmucks that'll be buying at a higher price. So you buy. But if on the other hand, you're in an environment where you know that potentially tariffs might be coming down because of trade deals, what are you going to do? Well, in theory at least, you're going to stay absolutely still. Because you don't want to be the schmuck that buys at high prices when you know that tariffs might be coming down. So I'd also be quite cautious about, being a bit too exuberant about, this news. Because again, this isn't a trade deal. This is just a pause during which we have tariffs at 30%. But again, you probably kind of have the outlook or at the very least the potential, the possibility that tariffs might be coming down a little bit more. And so if you know that tariffs are coming down, you might wait. So I would also consider that when it comes down to, inflation and consumption and growth. I would also consider that. As far as the CPI report goes, you can read all these single categories right here, but I want to kind of extrapolate something from this report in particular. And we really didn't have anything in particular, kind of skyrocket. Okay, it was pretty mild CPI report, all things considered. But I would like to point the attention to, say, airline fares, because I think that this is particularly relevant to even something else that we went over in my previous videos, in relation to, excuse me, the tariff drama. And it comes back to the idea that we are not in an environment where we have wages pushing up in a significant manner. And the best proxy for that, in my opinion, is the quits rate. Just look at what people are doing. They're not really quitting their job as much as they were back here, indicating that they really don't have, they don't really see a labor market that is supportive of wages pushing higher and higher and higher. So in effect, you have wages kind of staying flattish. And in that kind of environment, let's say that you have $20,000 to spend at the end of each month. Just something. I'm pulling a number out of thin air. And before tariffs, you had to buy a car, right? And you have 10K. You would have had 10K to put down for a down payment of said automobile. Then tariffs all of a sudden come around, and you have to put down, instead of 10,000, maybe 15,000. Right? Just something absurd. The net effect of that is that you still had 20,000 to spend. Before, you had 10,000 left because of the $10,000 on the down payment. Now you have $5,000 left to spend on everything else because of the down payment going up. And what that means is that you have less money to spend on everything else. All right, whatever it is you want to spend, the rest of the money on, alcohol, cigarettes, go have fun. But what I'm saying, what I wanted to point out with this is that potentially, if you don't have a way of pushing your wage and your income up, all you're doing is that you're spending more money, okay, for the same amount of goods, which eventually leads you to spend less on everything else. So, even as far as the tariff inflation is concerned, I continue to not see the the inflationary scare behind tariffs. As the way I simply look at tariffs is that they are a tax. All right. The best example I can give you is I'm part Australian. All right. My uncle used to smoke. I remember him talking about many times about how much a pack of cigarettes costs. And if I'm not mistaken, right now, a pack of cigarettes in Australia costs you like $40, $50, something ridiculous, because they're incredibly taxed. And what does that do to the consumption of cigarettes? Does it go up? No, no, it doesn't. All right. So whenever you tax something, you are punishing anybody that partakes in that activity. If you're taxing trade, you are punishing people that trade. Eventually, people will do less of it. So, everything that has happened really doesn't change my outlook. And really, this CPI report is more of what I was expecting, really. I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see this downtrend continue. And eventually, whenever we get through all the inventory that we built up, and if the tariffs are still in place, well, then at that point I could see maybe the CPI bump up for a month or two. But again, the economic backdrop is quite different to what it was in 2022. And I still believe that most of this, inflation fear is mostly inflation PTSD, as I've been calling it. I remain in that camp. Things really haven't changed that much, and I think that I was pretty correct, and I'll pat myself on the back for that. That as the week that we got the electronics exemption, that was the signal, as far as I'm concerned, that the crazy headlines on tariffs were behind us, and we were going to get something a little bit more constructive. And eventually, even this reduction in the 125 or 45% tariffs that we got, that is constructive. Okay, it definitely is. But that doesn't mean though, and I've always reiterated this, that doesn't mean that we're leaving tariffs behind us. We still have tariffs, and they are substantially higher than where they were before April 2nd, all right? Even 10%, a flat 10% tariff on the world is substantially higher, again, than where we were prior to April 2nd, all right? Let alone 30%. Okay, so we definitely have to deal with the fallout of tariffs, all right, with everything that we've talked about before. So again, this CPI report is a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned, and let's see where PPI comes out tomorrow, because again, the components of PPI feed into PCE, which is the preferred inflation metric, by the Fed, really. So let's see how PPI comes out tomorrow. We could get some dynamics in the bond market where, similar to what happened really in when I first started making videos, actually, because February 12th, it was right here, this lonely candle right here, I think. Yep, I remember. This candle right here was CPI day. And we had a huge sell-off, all right, in bonds that day. But the next day, we had a somewhat hot read in PPI as well. But we actually had a huge rally because of it, because of the components that made PPI fed into PCE, and the bond market was extrapolating a cooler PCE read at the end of the month. We are currently, as far as I'll make a different video on dedicated video to TLT. We're kind of battling, for this parallel channel, and we're very close to invalidating it. But I will be making another video quite soon on TLT. So just to summarize, CPI came out good. That's pretty much most of the video. And again, while we do have constructive news on tariffs, again, I was expecting that I was expecting the craziness to be behind us. But again, that doesn't push away tariffs at the very least, all right? It just, puts us in a situation where all right, not crazy, and we're not at zero, we're at 30% with China, which is substantially higher than where we were before April 2nd. And on top of that, we also have a 10% flat rate on the rest of the world, which is, again, substantially higher than where we were prior to April 2nd. So we still have to deal absolutely with tariffs and what the effects will be of these tariffs right here. As far as any bump in inflation, I would expect that to come whenever you start seeing inventories potentially be depleted. Everything that we bought in the lead up to April, whenever that comes to an end, I would expect us actually to potentially see a bump in inflation, because again, you're buying tariffed goods at that point, and the question will be at that point whether or not we still have tariffs. And just to finish off, the fact that we're leaving the 10% tariffs and we're at 30% with China puts us in scenario 3A. In a scenario where tariffs are not a bargaining chip, but they are structural and they are a source of revenue. But again, tariffs are a tax. You are punishing. Taxes really punish behavior, and tariffs punish trade. So, for me, tariffs are bad for growth. Just to put it bluntly. Okay, so that is the way I'm going on tariffs. And again, CPI came out fine. You know, we made a new low for this. Well, new low. I mean, yeah. The prior low was 2.4. Now we're at 2.3. It's a step in the right direction, but it's definitely too early to kind of, wave victory. We'll see how inflation comes out, and I'll keep you updated. Again, I said it in my previous video. The summer is usually my busiest time of the year, so I'll be making videos whenever I can. I will do my best to keep you posted. If you like this kind of content, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.